There's a progressive Christian on TikTok who calls himself Skeptic Pastor, and he thinks that King David and Jonathan, son of King Saul, might have been a gay couple. Let's have him explain.
Have you ever heard that King David and Jonathan from the Bible were gay or bi? Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. I remember the first time somebody told me this about David and Jonathan when I was an evangelical, and I was super angry and offended, and I kind of ignored what they said. Then a couple of years later, somebody said the same thing to me, and I realized I needed to look into it. I needed to figure out what they were talking about. And I looked into this Bible verse, and I went into it just saying, okay, this is not a thing. There's no way this could possibly be a thing. And then I read this verse, and this Bible passage, let me read it.
Here we go again, another spineless ex-evangelical thinking he's discovered something very profound. These guys always think they're being so open-minded and clever when really they just refuse to stand for anything. And if you honestly think that David and Jonathan were gay lovers, you've completely lost the plot. You have no idea what you're talking about. But of course, let's allow Mr. Skeptic Pastor to present his so-called biblical argument.
All right, so I am, of course, reading from the New Revised Standard Updated Edition. That is the version of the Bible that scholars say is the most accurate, and definitely want to have accuracy here.
Pause. This right here shows his biblical illiteracy. No, scholars do not unanimously agree that the NRSV Updated Edition is the most accurate translation. Plenty of respected scholars prefer other versions or compare multiple ones, so he just made that up. Anyway, back to the video.
Here's the verse. It's in 1 Samuel chapter 18. It says, "When David had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan," here it is, this is part. "The soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that he was wearing and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt." That's the verse.
Someone needs to tell Skeptic Pastor that reading the scriptures through the lens of gay fan fiction isn't Bible study. Let's break this down. David, God's anointed future king, and Jonathan, the son of King Saul, were countrymen and fellow soldiers. Jonathan defeats the Philistines in 1 Samuel 14, and David similarly defeats Goliath in 1 Samuel 17. So when Jonathan pledges loyalty to David in 1 Samuel 18, which is the passage in question, it's completely normal. David just saved his entire country. So let's look at the language. Verse 1 says that Jonathan's soul was knit to David's. The Hebrew word for knit is kashar. It means to bind, join, strengthen, or even form an alliance. It's the same word that Jacob uses for his son, Benjamin, in Genesis 44:30. Obviously not inherently sexual, right? Then we read that Jonathan loved David as his own soul. The word for love here is ahav, and it's used for Abraham's love for his son, Isaac, in Genesis 22:2. Again, it's family loyalty, covenant affection, not romance. But what about Jonathan giving David his robe, his armor, sword, bow, and belt? That's not intimacy, it's honor. In the previous chapter, 1 Samuel 17:38, King Saul offers David his armor too. Are we supposed to assume that Saul was making a sexual move as well? Of course not. It's a royal gesture of respect. Esther 6:10-11 gives the same cultural pattern. The king honors Mordecai by giving him his royal robe and his horse. So there is nothing sexual in any of this, the language, the context, or the culture. There isn't hidden romance, it's just covenant loyalty and royal symbolism. But progressive Christians will still try to make everything gay. They just can't help themselves. But what Skeptic Pastor does next goes even further off the rails.
They were bound, soul to soul. And then there's this moment where Jonathan takes all of his clothes off. He is completely naked, and gives all the clothes to David and all the armor.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a complete lie. Jonathan removed his outer garment. He was not fully naked. Like everyone in this culture, he still wore undergarments, just like Peter was stripped for work in John 21:7 until he put his outer cloak back on. Nothing in the text suggests that Jonathan was fully undressed. That idea is pure imagination. Once again, notice that progressive Christians seem desperate to inject gay fan fiction into this passage. They simply can't help themselves. And now watch as skeptic pastor invents even more nonsense to prop up his fabricated story.
So when I read that, back in my days of being completely brainwashed by evangelicalism, I was shook. I was like, WTF, like what is happening here? And I started doing research, and it's not clear. Like if you look for scholars and you ask them this question, the scholars will say like, we just don't know. We don't have enough data. Like it's equally plausible that this ceremony and these words were meant to convey that David and Jonathan had a romantic relationship, that they were deeply in love and committed to each other, something very similar to what people who are gay in our modern culture experience in their like deeply committed relationships when they find those relationships.
Okay, first off, imagine believing this nonsense and then calling evangelicals brainwashed. That's some serious projection. But let's be clear, no reputable Bible scholar sees any evidence of romantic or sexual relationship between David or Jonathan in this passage. As we've already shown from the text itself and its vocabulary and its cultural context, and the parallel passages, there is nothing in the biblical record suggesting anything romantic. That's only happening in the imagination of those trying to force a modern narrative on an ancient story. On top of all that, we actually have positive evidence that David was not gay. He openly affirms the goodness of God's law in Psalm 19, which includes the Levitical law against same-sex acts, Leviticus 18:22. And Scripture itself records his affair in detail with a woman named Bathsheba. The more you examine the facts, the more the theory collapses. Yet progressives love to throw around words like research and scholarship and analysis as credibility to disguise the weakness of their actual argument. Don't be fooled. Trust what the Scripture actually says. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe and check out the next one. Fight for Truth is powered by viewers like you. Become a monthly patron and get a free Fight for Truth mug as a thank you. Link in description. Help us reach our goal of 100 patrons so that we can make more videos. Thank you, and God bless.